Hi, folks. This is Mark Smith with Family Tree Life Coaches, and we have Dr. Larry Taylor with us, of course. It's not the Mark and Larry show, it's the Larry and Mark show. Larry got promoted. So Larry, this is actually sort of your topic today. You said in an email to me that some of the as a life coach, some of the people that you would like to help is those who would like to seek deep, and I think you mean genuine spirituality. Those for whom, for whatever reason, the church doesn't really work for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then also those hurt by any form of churches. There's institutional churches, there's flaky Bible schools, there's overly zealous Christian singers, there's so many different flavors of ways that well-intentioned people given over to blending their issues with their faith can somehow do harm. But what are your thoughts on the topic today? What do you want to express to the folks?
Yeah, I don't think it's exclusive to churches. I mean, I know from what other people have told me that these kind of things also happen in synagogues, and I would assume they probably happen in mosques and other places as well. I don't think it's a Christian problem. I think it's a human problem.
Right.
And when I think about toxic faith communities, of course, I guess the first thing that comes to most people's minds are all the things that have been in the news, like the pedophilia scandal in the Roman Catholic Church, and there've been some very prominent Protestant mega church pastors who have.
Well, that one with Bill Hybels just shocked the heck out of me.
Yeah. I mean,
I thought he was the authentic deal, and to find out that he'd been sexually harassing women for decades just floored me, and everybody hit it.
Yeah. And I think some of that is, I think there need to be some systemic changes in a lot of those situations where, if you set up a faith community like a church and you set it up top down, the pastor's the CEO, answerable to nobody, and it collects around him, gets power, collects around him people that just tell him what he wants to hear. I say him because it's almost always a him.
Almost always a him.
Yeah. But more specifically, I guess what I was thinking we could focus in on today is are some of the people that have been hurt by that, because I'm one of them, and I know you well enough to know that you have been also. I went through a situation personally where I pastored a large church. It was a church that I had founded, I had started. It was a church that had grown very rapidly, and at the time, it was the largest church in the city in which we lived.
This was in Colorado somewhere.
Colorado Springs, yeah. And there were a lot of beautiful, fun memories there. But during that whole time, for a lot of other reasons, my marriage was completely falling apart. I got married when I was 18 years old to a woman who came from a very different background, and without going into all that stuff, this thing had really been deteriorating for a long time. Finally came to a head, fell apart, and when we separated, the church reacted. I say the church, the leadership reacted by strongly requesting me to leave. So I wound up losing the church. I wound up losing my career. I wound up losing, at the time, my whole sense of self was wrapped up in that.
I imagine if that's what your focus was, yeah.
Yeah. And that probably wasn't good, but I didn't see myself at the time, I don't think, as someone that God loves. I saw myself as someone who is a pastor who serves God, and when you can't do that anymore, then what good are you? And there were a lot of people that I thought were friends who turned their backs on me, wouldn't talk to me anymore. And some of them, a few of them were even pretty cruel. And then that got piled on a few years later, when our oldest son committed suicide, and some of those same people were at the funeral and told me that I didn't have faith because I was crying. And
How did you not punch that guy in the face?
I was too sad.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just too
He was
overwhelmed with
piling
grief.
on. He was kicking you when you were down.
Yeah, I didn't have the energy.
If I'd have been standing there, I'd have punched him several times.
Yeah, I wish you had been there to punch him. Yeah. Yeah, I was also told that my son was in hell because he committed suicide.
Oh, I'd have grabbed him by his drawers and thrown him out of the building.
Yeah, I mean, then so that's what I'm talking about here is toxic theology, toxic belief systems, and we see them in many different areas. But I think that sometimes faith communities can perpetuate toxic belief systems or encourage toxic belief systems. I know of a pastor who wound up being successfully sued because a woman came to him, told him that her husband was abusing her. He told her she had to go submit to him and stay with him and live to him. Yeah, and he beat her up to the point where she almost died.
How did the pastor get sued though for that?
Well, her brother filed a lawsuit, and said she's in this condition because
for having really bad theology.
Yeah, you can be sued for saying stupid things in a counseling situation.
I guess that's true.
Especially in that kind of situation where it's authoritative. Yeah, and the authority. It's like I'm the pastor. I speak for God, and God wants you to go back with that guy and get beat up, kind of thing. Obviously, he didn't say that, but.
Well, I'm glad he got sued, and I'm glad that happened. But in a way, it's like these people are, I think most of them are well-intentioned. They're just blind. Mm-hmm. I was one of those people. I had all the answers. I abrasively gave feedback to people, and I honestly thought I was trying to help them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I've been there too. I think that's the attraction of fundamentalism, whether it's in religion or any other area, is fundamentalism has all the answers. It makes life real simple.
It makes being confused and lost and depressed, doesn't it?
I know exactly what my role is and what I'm supposed to do and what I'm supposed to think, and I don't have to. I don't have to do that balancing act where I'm holding seemingly contradictory things at the same time.
What's interesting is I look back on from age 17 to about 31, my religious addiction, and I was like mainlining hardcore heroin religion. I was preach on campus, hand out tracts, bring your Bible to school, speak in tongues kind of guy. But as I look back on it, it was sort of a cocoon.
Mm-hmm.
I could have been doing drugs. I could have been an alcoholic. I could have been in and out of several marriages with psychopaths. Instead, I was hanging out with a lot of, for the most part, really good and well-intentioned people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the nice things is I had a couple of surrogate fathers
Mm.
that mentored me and fathered me. And it was damaging and hurtful and constraining and negative and harmed me in a lot of ways, but it was like a comfortable old shoe that kept me out of trouble for 14 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And maybe that part was good, I mean, what's being addicted to heroin is probably worse.
I think there's some addictions that have very little upside.
Mm-hmm.
There's some like work addiction has some upside. You make a name for yourself, you make a lot of money.
Yeah.
It has a lot of downside, and I think religious, that you get a family,
Mm-hmm.
you get all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get to go to heaven forever. I mean, it sort of has a trade-off with some of the negative stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It does. And sadly, I've seen so many people who have been hurt by religious institutions in one way or another who in my opinion, throw the baby out with the bathwater, who just chuck it all out and say, I'm not going to have anything to do with, God or religion of anything.
They think the issue is the group. See,
Uh-huh.
what we do in marriage is, however we were wounded, we're calibrated to pick someone to love us like the people who hurt us the most. The same thing with churches.
Mm.
The reason I became a Christian, had a born again experience when I was 17, is I was filled with shame.
Mm.
I had just wrecked. My dad only had 2 new cars his whole life. I totaled both of them when I was 17. And after the second one, I had so much shame that I sort of gave myself over to this new part of me, and it gave me a sense of atonement somehow, because you then find out about the biblical story, and it's I used this example earlier, but so let's say this is humanity's condition. I say on a scale of 1 to 10, mental health wise, most of us are right around 3.
Mm-hmm.
It's true around the world. I work with all kinds of people from all around the world, and they're all 3, right around 3. Mm-hmm. I can't lift my hand up real hard here because my rotator cuff.
Yeah.
And this is pure Christianity over here. You mix together, what do you get? You get a dysfunctional brand of Christianity every single time.
Mm. That's interesting. Yeah, interesting way to put it. Yeah. Yeah, because it seems to me that the genuine article starts, at least for me individually, personally, the genuine thing starts with an understanding that God in God's essence is love, and therefore I am unconditionally loved. And as I seek to believe that and absorb that and walk in that, it changes everything.
Yeah.
But that's not what I get from most
what
churches.
You're talking about there is every 12-step group
Mm-hmm.
Every good therapist, every good therapy book is saying the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
is the key to positive, healthy mental health is, wherever you get it, is a genuine love for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a higher power that's part of that program, then great. But I keep hearing it over and over and over because it's the truth. But when you're 17 and you've been raised in rage and poverty,
Mm-hmm.
instability, you don't know anything about love.
Right.
You just want to not be bad. You just want to be good enough.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure there's as many reasons that drive people as there are people. But yeah, shame has got to be a huge one. Fear, I think, is another one, that fear of rejection, fear of damnation, fear of death, fear of annihilation, all those things.
But what I'm saying is, why did you marry who you married when you were 18? And by the way, 18 sounds like it had a lot to do with it, but I don't think it had a lot to do with it. Actually, it should be outlawed to marry at 18, but it's still, we marry and fall in love with somebody who's going to be good at not meeting our needs and going to be good at hurting us. So if you'd have married her when you were 23 or 25, it would have ended the same way because
Yeah.
that's who you were drawn to. But what I did was I created a God in my mother's image.
Mm.
My mother was harsh, abrasive, mean,
Mm.
revengeful, controlling, and I gravitated toward messages that were everything like my mother.
Mm.
And I gravitated toward leaders who were like my mother. Now, once I joined the group and got around the leaders like my mother, it lasted about a month or two and I was out.
Mm.
So I didn't stay in these cult-like, personality cult-like groups very long.
Mm-hmm.
I got away from those. But that's sort of what we do. If you got really sick religion, then start with the roots of, what happened in your childhood, and you'll find out why you joined.
Mm.
Like that David Koresh thing in Waco, Texas. The weird thing was, I was in Texas that day. I was testifying at a
Were you?
custody battle, and I saw the flame. I saw the smoke.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, that was creepy.
Wow.
It was creepy.
Yeah. 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 And of course we remember those extreme examples. Um, and sometimes I think we can look at those extreme examples and then compare them to what I'm involved in and think, well, I'm not involved in anything like that. But what I'm involved in may also be toxic, just perhaps less so. But
It's a sort of on a continuum,
yeah,
is what I've noticed. And
yeah,
I was in some healthier groups and some unhealthier groups.
yeah. And I think a real key to telling whether the group is healthy or not revolves around coercion. If there's coercion, it's unhealthy.
Yeah.
Wherever it's coming from, within the group. I mean, if the leader is coercive, then or manipulative, those are slightly different, I think. But for me, that's a big sign.
Yeah.
Because people in religious authority do have authority.
But they can use it in an unhealthy, abusive way.
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah. Yeah. I heard a really a Catholic priest that I admire greatly, and he said, because people call me father, he said that means that oftentimes they will give me an audience, they'll listen to me, whereas they might not otherwise. He said it also, however, means that I can deeply hurt them if I'm not careful.
Wow. Wow.
And I thought that was well put.
Here's an interesting example of a group, and a lot of movements or groups, religious groups, in essence, they're creating their own psychology. I am a graduate of Rhema Bible Training Center in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, founded by Dr. Kenneth Hagin. And Dr. Kenneth Hagin grew up in extreme poverty. He tells his story about one day he was out on a street corner and he hadn't eaten in so long. A kid had a peanut butter sandwich and he sniffed it and fainted. It had been so long since he'd had food. And so this fellow who grew up in poverty, what did he come up with? The prosperity doctrine.
Yeah, yeah.
You give to the Lord and you have faith, and you'll be riding a Cadillac in a little bit. And then and if you get sick and you get cancer, heal, boom, you don't got no cancer no more. But wasn't really true. But it seemed true when you were there. When I was there, one of my classmates was Ellie Mae from the Beverly Hillbillies. I'm not saying I hung out with her, but she was there.
Did she graduate?
She did.
Did she?
She went into ministry. She's since passed away.
Oh, has she? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she got cancer that couldn't be cured by.
No. Yeah, that's sad. Yeah, I think that's another red flag is if it's all about send me money.
I mean, these guys really weren't about send me money. Kenneth Hagin really believed if you had faith and you gave anywhere, not just, he wasn't looking for, now Kenneth Copeland might have been different. I think he was a little different. Ernest Angley.
Yeah.
There was some real Benny Hinn. There was some really wackos out there, but I think Dr. Hagin really believed that if you gave and you had faith, that you would be blessed. And then the thing with a lot of these things is there's some truth to it. If you do have faith, you will be blessed, but it's not a formula. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's true that living a life of generosity is good for us.
Will come back on you.
Yeah.
Whatever you sow, you shall reap. That's I would tell my new associates about marketing. I said, whatever you sow, you're going to reap. If you go out and meet with 100 people and give them 100 pamphlets, you're going to have so many clients you won't know what to do with. If you stay home and lay in bed and whine about not having clients, you ain't going to reap nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a spiritual fact, and you put corn in the ground and you fertilize it and get enough rain, you're going to have corn in the fall. Every time.
Yep. Yeah. So true. Yeah. But again, it's the motive, well, why is it that I want to live a generous life? If I want to live a generous life in order so I can get a bunch of stuff.
That's not godlike, is it?
It's not, and it's not really generosity either.
It's really self-seeking.
Yeah.
So another group I was in, Maranatha Ministries, the leader was this really narcissistic, hard-charging, loud-talking, black and white thinking guy named Bob Weiner. And there were probably 30 churches, all on college campuses. And then they were raising young men up, and they all were clones of Bob Weiner. They talked like him, they walked like him, they dressed like him, They preached like him because that was the power. Their doctrine wasn't cultish. Their leadership structure and leadership relationships were very cultish. They tried to make me into Bob Weiner, and it didn't work out very well at all. I was going to be Mark Smith. I wasn't going to be no friggin' anybody else.
Well, that's good. That's healthy.
That's all I could be.
Yeah. Yeah. Wasn't it Kierkegaard that said something to the effect of the deepest form of despair is not being who you really are?
Well, now we know why there's so much despair in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's because there's so many people. I was listening to Love Warrior, Glennon Doyle's first book, and she said alcohol was part of her. It was like her makeup, like how she would prepare her. It's like her hair dryer. It's like how she would prepare her. She called it her representative into the world. And what's so freeing, and what Family Tree has really always done since day one, is we've always been authentic. You know, we were doing group therapy, we'd go around the room, and the therapist had issues, and we'd flop it right out there just like we were a human being.
Yeah, authenticity is so important, and I think it's what deep inside we as humans crave for. We crave authenticity, we crave honesty, we crave genuine relationships, you know, not fake ones.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem with toxic faith communities is they set things up so that however it works, I somehow get the feeling that I have to put on a persona when I go to that place or be with those people. I have to be holy. I mean, in some cases, you have to dress the same as the rest of the people, and you have to talk the same as the rest of the people.
And that could be not only churches, but corporations. Or
yeah.
a lot of different forms of cults. IBM was a big cult. You wore the suit and the red tie every time.
Yeah.
And you were the IBM man, and they were all clones. Why? Because it worked, you know?
Yeah. White shirt, black wingtips.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about, we were talking earlier about Keith Green.
Yeah.
Most of you don't know who Keith Green is. If you were following Christian music in the late 70s and the early 80s, you would know that he was the #1 Christian artist at that time, ahead of Amy Grant. And I loved the guy because he was massively talented as a piano player and as a teacher, a singer. But his doctrine was really black and white, Bible thumping, shaming. But when you're a young person and you're thirsting to have passion about, I'd have jumped off a building for this guy. And a lot of people went to their ranch in Texas, and there was probably, 100, 150 people living. I mean, it was sort of a cult. I mean, they put out a killer newsletter and they did good for the world. And unfortunately, when you're counter dependent, when you think you're bulletproof, what happened was too many people got on the airplane. They had some folks in, and they wanted to show them around the property, and the plane crashed, and 2 of his kids were on the plane with him, and I was in mourning for years because I had such a bond. He had such a pure and passionate soul, as misguided as it was. It was pure and it was passionate. And I genuinely loved the guy, and it just killed me that he died.
Yeah. That's a good example of a person who was like you said, pure and passionate. Um, uh, and as we were talking earlier, had he lived longer, hopefully he would have eased up on himself a little bit.
I think he would. I think he was always looking for truth.
Yeah.
I think he would have gotten into recovery eventually, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because he was caught. He had integrity and he was always looking for truth. Those are the kind of people get in recovery eventually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So the cool thing is, even though I'm out of my religious addiction, and I have quite a fondness for using the F word, I do. I try to use it in many ways possible, you know.
He means phooey.
No, I don't. They know what I mean. So, but I still work for God, and God told me a ways back, hey, spend time with Dr. Larry. I'm like, why?
Yeah, really, why?
And he said, shut up and do what you're told. I'm like, all right, I ain't got Dr. Larry. But I get that that sense of being led. I feel in the Bible it talks about having a still small voice,
Mm-hmm.
and every once in a while I just get a direction. Sometimes it's in the middle of a therapy session where things will come out of my mouth and I'll go in directions. I'll like, where'd that come from? I didn't even know that I should have said that.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is, you don't have to be a religious addict and a fundamentalist to work for God and to be in relationship with God. When I get in foxholes, when I'm in pain, about 2 months ago, I was in a lot of pain, and I was in Oklahoma by a big lake. And I went and sat by the lake and prayed and prayed and prayed. And this beautiful blue heron showed up
Mm.
and hung out with me. I go to the lake the next day, pray, blue heron. I go to the lake that evening, pray and pray, blue heron. And it just felt like it was just a little affirmation that God was with me.
Yeah. 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 Grasping that unconditional love that's at the heart of the universe.
I don't know how, Larry, maybe you can tell me, how do people not believe in God? I'm going to the beach tomorrow for a week, and I just stand there and I just look at the waves and the sky and the vastness of the ocean. I go to where my daughter lives in Denver, and I look at the mountains. I'll go to a botanical garden, and there'll be like, 8,000 different kind of flowers. There's about 1,000 different kind of flowers right behind you in Larry's room there. And then there's like all these butterflies. How can you not believe in God?
Yeah, good question. I think probably the biggest reason why people would claim to be atheists is the problem of evil. What they struggle with, a lot of people struggle with, I think, is that if God is loving, is all loving and all powerful, then why is there evil in the world? Why is there poverty? Why are there wars? Why do children get cancer? All those kinds of things. And I think there's some answers to most of those questions, but I think that's a big reason why a lot of people
I'll tell you what,
struggle.
I haven't had cancer or lost anyone to violent death or anything, but most of my problems in life have all been self-inflicted. I mean, most people don't realize that their wounds are self-inflicted. They might blame it on their spouse or blame it on, their boss or whatever. But
Right. I mean, well, and most evil in the world is human caused. Wars. We pollute the air. We hurt each other. So I mean, that's a big one. Deep thinking people then would go to, well, what about natural evil? What about the tornado that came out of nowhere? And
tornado's not evil. Tornado's a force of nature.
yeah, but it can do bad things to people.
I don't care about that particular line of thinking. It just stuns me that somebody can look at a sunset or a butterfly or a hummingbird, think it all happened accidentally from a big bang. That's not even logical. It makes no sense at all. There's a designer who has a sense of humor. There's a fish that has a saw on the end of its nose. There's a designer with a sense of humor. No?
Well, we could really go down another road there, but
he must have a sense of humor to create. I know that.
Yeah, I personally, I believe that God creates through evolution, and I believe that God has designed so that there is freedom not only in human beings, but also in evolution is free to evolve to a certain degree.
Sure. I mean, you look at some of the science, there's something to it, but there's big gaps in the science too.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah. And for me, God is not just a God of the gaps, though. Yeah. God is the heart, the center, the core, the essence around which all else revolves, and which is drawing all into God's self. I see that as the end result. It all starts with love and ends with love.
I think for like family tree and life coaching and the work I've done, I try to introduce people to a good, loving, accepting, shameless God.
Yeah.
Because many times their vision of God is, dark, and it's pretty much they make God in the image of their abusive alcoholic father.
Right.
Right. So what I love about the 12-step programs is that they reconnect people with a higher power. Many times it's the God that you and I envision. And when they're struggling, they reach out, and it's helpful.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've often been talking with people, and a person will say, well, I don't believe in God. And if the time and place are right, I'll respond to that by asking, well, tell me about this God you don't believe in. And invariably, they describe a God that I don't believe in either. They describe some kind of a monster, who looks like that alcoholic father or that abusive mother or whatever it is,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Or the God that we got from some toxic religion thing we were raised in, a God that's harsh and ready to smack you if you get out of line.
I'll share a parting comment, and I'll throw you the ball, and then you can share a parting comment. We'll wrap up.
Okay.
I guess my thought is I'm grateful for the 14 years of protection, and it was an addiction, and it was unhealthy, and it made me sort of a weirdo. But it's what I needed. just like if I'm in a marriage with somebody who's very hurtful and damaging and critical, after I get out of the marriage, I don't hate that person. I am actually grateful for the growth that that person brought in me. And as I think about the groups that I was involved in, I just look at them as another form of healing on my journey that kept me safe. The cool thing was that during that time, there were some sort of family-centered, non-authoritarian, loving groups where I got some of the healthy fathering, sort of all the warm, fuzzy parts of a Christian family there was very little toxic. It wasn't very toxic,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I left, so that I could go find something more toxic. That's why I left the healthy church, because it wasn't,
Yeah.
didn't excite me the way, the toxic church did. But I just encourage people to, if you're like Kierkegaard, said that, you're not able to be yourself, and you find yourself lonely and sad in the world, one of the best things you could do is cry out to God, and he is real, and he will hear you. And he might come in the form of Dr. Larry. You might say, well, I'm waiting on God. I don't want Dr. Larry. I'm like, I don't want Mark Smith. I'm sort of waiting on God. But I think when you're in a foxhole, it's human nature to go to praying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think so too. And I, like you said, I don't think we're ever just crying out in the void. I think we don't always get the answers we want when we want them, but
we don't often get the answer that we want.
Right. But there is something very, very beautiful about a genuine community of people that care about each other. And some people find that in an AA group. Some people find that in a synagogue. Others find it in a church, probably not in a huge mega church, but in a small group, because, you can't be intimate with 1,200 people. But there is something beautiful about a group that is non-coercive and non-manipulative and not coming at you with an agenda, but is accepting and loving, and a place where you can be yourself and bring your questions and your doubts and your fears, and that's okay. And we don't have to agree on everything either in those kind of situations. I think that's a beautiful thing, and I think it's something that that all of us want and need at some level, regardless of whether we've been addicted to stuff or not. I think we all need that.
So if you're interested in some spiritual healing, some spiritual guidance, I'm probably not your guy. I'm more dig into your family tree and, see how many nuts are in the family tree. I got a lot of nuts in my family tree. But if you want to sort out your spiritual wounds and your spiritual hunger and healing, then Dr. Larry's your guy. So give him a shout.
Amen.
Amen. And all the people said, amen. You know what I liked about this, a lot of the groups I was in, is we sang a lot.
Yeah.
And that was fun. I mean, I sort of got high on Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
And I think in my case, it helped that I was not really raised in a church situation. I mean, we kind of sort of went occasionally, but we didn't work at it. And the first time I really got involved, I remember, well, I got involved with a bunch of Jesus freaks, and we met out in the woods and barns and all kinds of stuff. But the first time I was actually in a church building. I mean, first time in a long time. I was amazed that people were getting there early. They were sitting up front first. There were guys in black suits.
Instead of institutional churches.
Yeah, there were people that looked like they worked for IBM, but then there were long-haired Jesus freaks with bare feet and bangles and stuff. And everybody seemed to like each other.
Yeah. Hey, I got one more story to tell before we finish. And
Yeah.
I've told it before, but it's such an astounding story. So I wrecked my dad's car. I went and stood in the parking lot of the Catholic church right next to our house. Tried to get in the building, but it was locked. But you can pray in the parking lot as well as you can pray in the building. So I prayed. And then a couple weeks later, there was a girl in my class that invited me to a Bible study. And it was in Greentown, Indiana. Just, what is that? East, I think, of Kokomo, about 45 minutes or so. And I walked into, it was in a house. I walked in and I heard an angel singing. And he was playing a funny instrument, like you hold it in your hand and it had strings on it. And I don't even know what it's called. And it sounded like an angel. And you know who it was? It was Jerry Wise, the guy who used to have he still has his work on our channel, but he's gone on from being at Family Tree to being one of the hottest sought after life coaches in the world right now. He's hot stuff. But he worked for many years at Family Tree. And I met him when I was 17 years old, and he was a pastor and somebody who struggled with healthy religion and unhealthy religion, and somebody who's learned a thing or two about individuation and Bowenian therapy. But it's a small world. Then when we were in our early 30s, we met for a dinner. And it was quite an expensive dinner. We're trying to impress each other. And we talked about how we were going to work together and take over the world, impact the world. This was before the internet. And then the Lord had other plans for him, sort of put him on the sideline for a little while. And, but then he brought us back together, and really, I couldn't have built this channel without his tremendous gifts. So the Lord works in mysterious ways. And then, tells me to hang out with Dr. Larry, and here we are doing this show. I wouldn't have done a show by myself today, but I thought, hey, if Larry has a topic, I'd probably follow along. So yeah. Well,
I have one parting thought. Two things to keep in mind. Number one, God is nice.
I've never heard anybody say that before.
Number two,
God nice.
God likes you.
Wow. See, we hear God is love.
God is nice and God likes you.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I thought God was mean and he was really displeased with me.
Yeah. Like grumpy.
Cool. All right. If you do want to explore spiritual issues and healing and get to know the God who's like nice and who likes you, and that's really foreign to you, then
give us a shout.
Get a hold of Larry and do some work.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching, folks, and God bless.